DevilNeverCry.
What is up everyone, it is me DevilNeverCry, and in this video we'll be talking about the new System Shock remake. This game has to be one of the most purest forms of a remake that I've ever seen, and at the same time, one of the most challenging games that I've played in a long time. System Shock is an amalgamation of many different genres. Some may call it a first-person shooter combined with immersive sim, others may call it a cyberpunk-esque survival game with horror elements. Ultimately, it's a fantastic blend of all of those genres. The original System Shock launched in 1994 and quickly became known as an innovative classic, going on to inspire other series of games such as Deus Ex, Prey, and Bioshock. Night Dive Studios have essentially taken that exact game from 1994 and rebuilt it entirely from the ground up in Unreal Engine, giving it a modernized, stylish look that has a few unique retro-futuristic touches, such as pixelated textures that you can see here and there that harken back to the game that was. System Shock immediately throws you into the fray and wastes no time getting straight to the point. You take on the role of a hacker who has managed to infiltrate the Trioptimum Corporation's Citadel space station, though things quickly go awry when you're forced to disable the artificial intelligence ethical limitations throughout the space station. And thus enters the game's primary antagonist, SHODAN. The rogue AI has basically turned the space station into a literal living nightmare. The once peaceful space station's inhabitants have now either been turned into freakish, genetically modified mutants, or they've literally been ripped apart and put back together again in the form of death machine cyborgs. And it's basically up to you to put a stop to everything that's going on before it reaches Earth. With the general premise of System Shock's story out of the way, let's move on into the gameplay. When I said that this game was the purest form of a remake that I'd ever seen, I truly meant it. Night Dive Studios may have given this game a fresh coat of paint, but literally almost everything else remains completely untouched. Including the fact the game does absolutely no hand-holding when it comes to directing the player, and the fact that the level design remains as labyrinthine and obtuse as it was in the original. The game throws you headfirst into this maze of a space station, doesn't give you a waypoint, doesn't give you an objective, any quest markers, nothing at all. It's entirely up to the player to discover what kind of objectives they're able to complete, where they're able to go, and what sort of things they're able to find. Exploration certainly is paramount to making progress in the Citadel, and of course to surviving. At often points you'll find locked gates or locked doors, or areas that you can't necessarily explore just yet due to things such as radiation. To find a way forward in moments such as these, you'll either have to come back to this specific area once you're better equipped, or you'll likely have to do some sleuthing, finding audio logs or perhaps looting dead bodies for clues to figure out what the specific codes to keypads are, or to figuring out the best way to solve a puzzle. Though it may seem somewhat peculiar or perhaps jarring at first in the fact that you're not immediately bombarded with quest logs or directions on where to go, it is refreshing to be able to just dive into the game and carve out your own path through the space station in an attempt to survive. Though I completely understand that this may not be to the taste of everyone out there who wishes to play System Shock. As such, the game features multiple different difficulty sliders, allowing you to customize the difficulty that you wish to play on. The first difficulty option pertains directly to the game's combat. Easy, normal, or hard will allow you to affect the amount of enemies that you encounter on the spaceship, how ruthless their AI is in essentially pursuing you throughout the ship, and of course the amount of damage that they do whenever they strike the player. The second difficulty option you're able to adjust correlates directly to the player's mission. Putting this on easy will actually provide the player with a waypoint system that will provide a gentle nudge in regards to what objectives you're able to complete to be able to progress throughout the space station. On the other hand, however, putting this setting on hard will actually only give you 5 hours to complete the entirety of System Shock Remake, and if you happen to die without actually enabling one of the regeneration bays that you can find throughout the multiple different levels of the space station, which essentially are places that the player can respawn typically if they die, then the death is permanent. I imagine that that's going to be more for the purists or those who are well and truly versed with the world of System Shock. I, on the other hand, just simply played it on normal, and it was more than enough of a challenge for me to get through. The next modifier that you're able to adjust are for the cyberspace sections. At certain points whenever you're hacking into certain terminals, the game will transition into a wireframe sort of exploration shooter as you go through literal cyberspace to complete certain objectives while also taking down rogue programs on the terminal. While it can initially be jarring getting accustomed to this specific mode, especially as you have to get used to the game rotating on multiple different axes as you go through cyberspace, I found it to be a decent refresher when it comes to the pacing of System Shock. The last setting that you're able to alter to tweak and customize your own overall difficulty pertains to this game's puzzles. There's a fair few puzzles that you can find throughout the Citadel space station, and a lot of them are going to be head scratchers, particularly the junction box puzzles where you have to redirect power. A lot of these had me stuck there waiting 10 to 15 minutes just trying to figure out a way to get through. As previously mentioned, my entire experience with the System Shock remake was played out on normal, and even still this game was quite a challenge just to get through. I had to quite literally abuse the quick save feature just to ensure that I got through a lot of encounters without wasting a substantial amount of resources. The Citadel space station is absolutely teeming, brimming with lots of enemies to get stuck into, and only a finite amount of ammo for the weapons that you're able to find. Combine that with the fact that enemies do a substantial amount of damage when they hit you, and the fact that health pickups aren't necessarily in an abundance throughout this entire ship, and you're going to want to have to think about each encounter that you go into, and whether sometimes it's better to just skip that encounter entirely if available, sometimes sleuthing or stealthing your way past enemies instead of just going in guns blazing is the better option. When I initially dived into the System Shock remake, I do what I normally do when I play a video game: systematically defeat every single enemy that I find, clearing out room by room, corridor by corridor, essentially turning the entire floor into somewhat of a safe haven, allowing me to explore to my heart's content without the looming threat of being attacked from behind. However, I quickly learned that that was something I shouldn't do here, as enemies will eventually respawn in an area, and they will do so quite frequently. And so if you don't think that you'll be revisiting an area anytime soon, sometimes it's best to just let sleeping dogs lie and try and skirt around them without wasting ammunition. Ultimately, you'll want to be strategic when it comes to dispatching enemies, making sure that you use the right tool from your arsenal to take care of specific enemy types. Mutants specifically take better damage from ballistics, whereas cyborgs and machines often end up taking more damage from electrical weapons. And if none of that works or you've run out of ammunition, you do have the option of using melee attacks that you'll be at far greater risk of taking damage due to being in such close proximity to your enemies. Moving on from the combat, the game continues to go from strength to strength when you consider other factors such as the game's sound design. The voice acting found in audio logs is believable, and I believe SHODAN's original voice actor actually returns for this remake to once more provide an absolutely harrowing rendition of a mad AI. Also worth mentioning is the game's soundtrack, which punctuates everything the player does, whether it's traipsing down an unlit corridor or facing off against some ungodly machination. All in all, as someone who tried to play the original System Shock perhaps a little bit too late and found it to be antiquated, I can safely say that Night Dive Studios have successfully revived and modernized System Shock, whilst also keeping all of the charm from the original. If you're looking for a game to lose yourself in, a game that will push you and challenge you to engage with its mechanics, I can safely recommend System Shock. And with that, we come to the end of this video. Let me know down in the comments below whether you've played the original System Shock and whether or not you're interested in trying out the remake. With all that said and done, it has been me, DevilNeverCry. I'd like to thank all of you for watching, and as always, I'll see you all next video.